The individual investor should act consistently as an investor and not as a speculator. Ben Graham wrote that in 1949. And here's the thing, he was writing for adults with capital in suits with brokers. He had no idea that 75 years later, the average 25-year-old would be getting their financial education from a 30-second video between a dance trend and a guy eating a burger in his car. But that's where we are. So let's actually look at the numbers, the real ones. Because here's a scenario I want you to sit with. You're 25, you've got a job, maybe two, you're technically an adult. You file your own taxes, you have your own phone bill, you've got a credit card with a balance you're handling, and every few weeks you do this thing where you open your banking app, look at the number, feel a small jolt of anxiety, and close it again before the feeling fully forms. You're not broke, but you're not okay either. You're somewhere in between, a financial gray zone where you're functioning but not building, surviving but not winning. And the worst part is, you have no idea whether you're normal, ahead, or catastrophically behind. Because nobody will give you the actual numbers. Today, I'm giving you the actual numbers. The average savings, the average debt, the average net worth, what Gen Z is really walking into as they enter their prime earning years, backed by data, not vibes. And I promise you, by the end of this video, you are going to know exactly where you stand, and more importantly, exactly what to do about it. My name is Slime Johnson. This is Slime's Wealth Academy. Let's go. If you're a young person who feels like you're flying completely blind financially, like everyone else got a manual you never received, like you're making it up as you go and hoping it works out, make sure you hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if it helps you out. Because today we are doing what almost nobody does. We are putting the real Gen Z financial picture on the table. No shame, no doom. Just the data, what it means, and the specific moves that put you ahead of the average, which, as you're about to see, is a lower bar than you think. So stay with me. Part 1, the history lesson. Why Gen started the race 50 yards back. To understand the numbers you're about to see, you need to understand why they look the way they do. Because if I just throw stats at you without context, you'll either panic or dismiss them, and neither helps. So let's go back. Not to ancient history, just to your parents' starting line versus yours. In 1980, the median home price in the United States was approximately $47,200. The median household income was about $21,000. That's a price to income ratio of roughly 2.2. A typical family could buy a typical home for a little over 2 years of gross income. Fast forward to today. The median home price is approximately $412,000. Median household income is roughly $80,000. That's a price to income ratio of about 5.1. Let me make that concrete. Housing relative to income costs more than twice what it cost when your parents were starting out. The same milestone, owning a home, requires more than double the relative financial firepower it required a generation ago. Now layer on education. In 1980, the average cost of 1 year at a 4-year public college, adjusted for inflation, was around $2,500 in today's dollars. Today, it's around $11,000 per year for in-state public and far more for private. Your parents could work a summer job and cover a meaningful chunk of tuition. That math is simply gone. Here's what most people don't realize about Gen Z's starting position. The total student loan debt in America is $1.77 trillion. The average Gen Z borrower carries around $2,900 in student debt, and they're carrying it earlier and at higher interest rates than any previous generation. And then, because the universe has a sense of humor, Gen Z entered the workforce during a global pandemic, the highest inflation in 40 years, and the fastest interest rate hike cycle in modern history. So when you look at the savings and net worth numbers I'm about to give you, I do not want you to think Gen Z is irresponsible. That's lazy and it's wrong. The honest framing is this. Gen Z is running the same race their parents ran, but they started 50 yards back on a track that got longer while it started raining. That context matters because the numbers are sobering, but sobering is not the same as hopeless. And the difference between those two things is the entire point of this channel. Let's look at the data. Part 2, the ditto. The numbers nobody shows you, okay. This is the part you came for. Let me walk you through exactly where the average 25-year-old American actually stands. And I want you to hold two reactions at once. Honesty about how rough some of this is, and clarity about how beatable the average actually is. The savings number, let's start with cash savings. According to data drawn from the Federal Reserve and various consumer finance surveys, the median bank account balance for Americans under 35 is approximately $3,240. The median for the broader population is higher, but for the under 35 cohort specifically, we're looking at a few $1,000s in actual liquid savings. Now, here's the more alarming version of that number. Multiple surveys, including ongoing bank rate emergency savings research, have consistently found that over half of Americans cannot cover an unexpected $1,000 expense from savings. For Gen Z specifically, the number is worse. Roughly 57% of Gen Z adults report they could not cover a $1,000 emergency with cash. Think about what that means. More than half of young adults are one car repair, one medical bill, one broken laptop away from going into debt. Not because of a catastrophe, because of a Tuesday. The retirement number here is where it gets genuinely interesting and where the story is more hopeful than you'd expect. Despite everything I just described, Gen Z is actually starting to invest for retirement earlier than any prior generation. According to research from financial institutions, including Fidelity and analysis from the Transamerica Center for Retirement Studies, the median age that Gen Z started saving for retirement is 19. For millennials, it was 25. For Gen X, it was 30. For boomers, it was 35. Read that again. Gen Z started at 19, boomers started at 35. That is a 16-year head start on the most powerful force in finance. But, and this is the villain entering the story, the amounts are small. The median Gen Z retirement account balance is estimated in the range of $6,000 to $13,000 depending on the survey, which makes sense. They just started and they're not earning much yet. So we have a generation that understands it should start early, which is the single most important insight in all of investing, but is fighting an environment that makes the actual contribution amounts painfully small. The debt number now, the heavy part. The average Gen Z credit card balance is approximately $3,200. According to credit bureau data from sources like TransUnion, that number alone isn't catastrophic. The problem is the interest rate environment it's sitting in. The average credit card APR right now is approximately 24%. We covered in a previous video exactly what that does to you, but quickly, a $3 to $100 balance at 24% making minimum payments takes well over a decade to pay off and more than doubles in total cost. Add the student loans that average $2,900 and the picture sharpens. The average Gen Z adult is carrying somewhere in the neighborhood of $24,000 in combined consumer and student debt, much of it at interest rates between 6% and 24%. The net worth number, so let's put it all together into the number that actually matters. Net worth. Everything you own minus everything you owe. According to the Federal Reserve Survey of Consumer Finances, the median net worth for households under 35 is approximately $39,000. But, and this is critical, that number is heavily skewed by the minority of young people who already own homes or received significant family transfers. The median is dragged upward by the top of the distribution. For a 25-year-old specifically, not the full under 35 band, but someone right at 25, the realistic median net worth, once you strip out home equity and family wealth, is much closer to a range between $0 and $10,000. And a substantial percentage of 25-year-olds have a negative net worth. They owe more than they own. Their student loans and credit card balances exceed their savings and assets. Let me say that as plainly as I can. It is completely normal statistically for a 25-year-old American to have a net worth at or below zero. If that's you, you are not behind. You are average. And here's the thing about average. Average is beatable easily. With knowledge, most people simply never get handed. That's where this gets really interesting. Part 3, the twist, the comparison trap, and the psychology of behind. Here's what most people don't realize about all these numbers. The single biggest threat to a 25-year-old's financial future isn't the debt. It isn't the low savings rate. It isn't even the brutal cost of housing. It's the psychological experience of feeling behind and what that feeling makes people do. Let me explain, because this is the part nobody talks about. There's a documented phenomenon in behavioral economics called social comparison theory, originally developed by psychologist Leon Festinger in 1954. The core idea: humans determine their own worth and status, not in absolute terms, but relative to the people around them. And here's the dangerous part for your generation specifically. You are the first generation in human history to grow up with a 24/7, algorithmically optimized, highlight reel feed of everyone else's apparent success piped directly into your nervous system. Your grandparents compared themselves to their neighbors, a few dozen people living roughly similar lives. You're comparing yourself to a curated global feed of the most financially successful, most aesthetically perfect, most strategically posted moments of millions of people: the vacations, the apartments, the cars, the I quit my 9 to 5 announcements. And here's the financial consequence. This is the mechanism. When you feel behind, your brain seeks to close the gap. But closing the real gap, building actual wealth, is slow and invisible. So instead, the brain reaches for the fast, visible fix, spending that signals success. The lifestyle that looks like you've made it, purchased on credit, to soothe the feeling of being behind a standard that isn't even real. A 2023 study on Gen Z financial behavior found that social media usage correlates strongly with impulse spending and what researchers call financial anxiety-driven consumption. You're being sold a feeling, and the price of that feeling is the exact capital that would have made you genuinely wealthy. This is the trap. The feeling of being behind, triggered by a fake standard, drives spending that creates real financial harm, which makes you actually fall further behind, which intensifies the feeling. It's a doom loop, and it is the single most expensive psychological pattern of your generation. Now, you might be thinking, okay, Slime, so I just feel bad and spend money. What's the alternative? The alternative is understanding a piece of math so powerful it makes the comparison trap look insane in retrospect. Because while you've been told you're behind, the actual data says something different. You have the one asset that every wealthy 50-year-old desperately wishes they could buy back and cannot at any price: time. And this is where it gets really interesting. Part 4, the present day, the Gen Z superpower nobody mentions. Let me show you what your situation actually looks like when you measure it by the variable that matters instead of the variables that don't. The average 25-year-old has roughly 40 years until traditional retirement age. 40 years. That is the single most valuable financial asset on the planet. And you are sitting on a mountain of it while feeling poor. Here's the math that should reframe everything. If a 25-year-old invests just $200 a month, which is 667 a day, into a broad market index fund earning the S&P 500's historical average of around percent, by age 65, they have approximately $116 million. $1.16 million from $200 a month, starting from zero, starting from average, starting from exactly where most of you are right now. Now, let's be honest and stress test that because this channel doesn't do fantasy math. Let's say future returns are lower than the historical average, which given current valuations is a real possibility we've discussed before. Let's run it at 7% instead of 10%. At 7%, that same $200 a month over 40 years becomes approximately $525,000. So your range, depending on what the market does over your investing lifetime, is roughly $500,000 to over $1 million from an amount of money most people waste without noticing. The Federal Reserve and various spending studies suggest the average young adult spends well over $200 a month on subscriptions, takeout, and impulse purchases they couldn't recall a week later. Here's the part that should genuinely make you sit up. The reason this works is something called asymmetric time advantage. A dollar invested at 25 has 40 years to compound. A dollar invested at 45 has 20. But because compounding is exponential, not linear, that's not twice the growth, it's dramatically more. Watch this. $10,000 invested at 25 at 10% becomes about 452,000 by 65. The same 10,000 invested at 35 becomes about 174,000 and invested at 45 about 67,000. Same $10,000. The only variable is when. The 25-year-old's version is nearly 7 times larger than the 45-year-old's. Not because they did anything smarter, but purely because they had more time. You are currently holding the most valuable version of every dollar you will ever invest in your life, right now, at 25. This is the cheapest, most powerful money you will ever have access to. And the comparison trap is trying to convince you to spend it on looking wealthy instead of becoming wealthy. That's the magnificent 7 moment of your financial life. Except the magnificent asset isn't 7 tech stocks, it's the 4 decades of compounding sitting in front of you. Part 5, how to beat the average starting today. Alright, enough data and theory. Let me give you the actual moves, the ones that take you from average or below to genuinely ahead in order starting today. Step 1, build a $1,000 starter emergency fund before anything else. Remember that stat 57% of Gen Z can't cover a $1,000 emergency. That is the first thing you fix because that single buffer is what breaks the debt cycle before it starts. When the car breaks or the laptop dies, you pay cash instead of reaching for the 24% credit card. This one buffer is the firewall between you and the entire high interest debt trap. Don't invest yet. Don't pay extra on debt yet. Just get $1,000 in a separate high yield savings account. Currently paying 4.5% to 5% by the way, which is the best cash return environment in over a decade. Park it. Name it emergency only. Don't touch it. Timeline at $50 a week, that's 20 weeks. 5 months, you can do this. Step 2, capture the free money, the 401 match. If your employer offers a 401 match and you're not capturing it, stop what you're doing and fix it this week. An employer match is a 100% instant return on your money. There is no investment on earth that reliably returns 100% instantly. If your employer matches 3% and you're not contributing 3%, you are declining a raise. Full stop. Step 3, kill the high interest debt with the avalanche method. Once you have the $1,000 buffer and you're capturing the match, attack the credit card debt. List every debt by interest rate. Throw every spare dollar at the highest rate debt while making minimums on the rest. That 24% credit card is costing you more than almost any investment will ever make you. Eliminating it is a guaranteed tax-free 24% return. Step 4, automate $200 a month into a Roth IRA. Here's why a Roth specifically. You're young, which means you're probably in a lower tax bracket now than you will be later. A Roth IRA uses money you've already paid taxes on, and then every dollar of growth, all 500,000 to $1 million of it, comes out completely tax-free in retirement. For a young person, the Roth is very often the single best investment account available. Set up an automatic transfer the day after payday. $200 or whatever you can manage. Even $50 starts the habit and the compounding. Put it in a low-cost broad market index fund. Then do the hardest thing in all of investing, nothing. Don't check it daily. Don't panic when it drops. Let 4 decades do the work. Step 5. Increase the contribution 1% every 6 months. You will barely feel it. But the compounding effect of a slowly rising contribution rate over 40 years is the difference between a $500,000 retirement and a multi-million dollar one. That's the whole system. 5 steps. None of them require a high income. All of them require a starting. Part 6. The honest take. No hype, no doom. Look, I need to be straight with you because that's the deal on this channel. The numbers I showed you today are real, and some of them are genuinely tough. Gen Z is entering adulthood with structural headwinds that previous generations did not face. Higher relative housing costs, a heavier student debt load, and a higher cost of living relative to entry level wages. I'm not going to pretend that hard work alone instantly erases a macroeconomic reality. That would be a lie, and you'd be right not to trust me. But here's the other side, and it's equally true. This generation has the single greatest financial advantage available: time combined with something no previous generation had: free instant access to the actual information. Your grandparents would have had to pay a financial advisor for what you can learn in an afternoon for free. The same internet that's running the comparison trap on you is also the greatest financial education tool ever created. Both things are true. The question is which one you let win. And on the market specifically, since this is a wealth channel, valuations right now are elevated by historical standards. The Shiller Cape ratio is sitting around 34 to 35 against a historical average near 17. That doesn't mean a crash is coming. Nobody can tell you that honestly. It means forward returns over the next decade might be more modest than the historical 10%, which is exactly why I stress tested the math at 7%. Your edge does not come from the market handing you 10% a year. Your edge comes from 40 years of consistent automated investing, a diversified low cost portfolio, and an emergency fund that keeps you from being forced to sell at the bottom. Don't bet everything on one stock because someone online doubled their money. Don't sit in cash because someone online is screaming about a crash. The boring, diversified, consistent path is the one the data supports, and it is overwhelmingly likely to make you wealthy if you simply do not quit. The future is genuinely uncertain. The correct response to uncertainty is not panic and not hype. It's risk management, consistency, and independent thinking. Here's what I need you to carry out of this video. The average 25-year-old American has a few $1,000s in savings, around $24,000 in combined debt, and a net worth hovering somewhere around zero. If that's you, you are not failing. You are average. You are statistically normal in an economy that genuinely got harder. But average is a starting line, not a sentence. Because here's the truth, the comparison feed will never show you. The person posting the leased car and the rooftop vacation might have a net worth lower than yours. Looking wealthy and being wealthy are two completely different things, and your generation, more than any before it, has been trained to confuse them. You don't need to look like you made it. You need to quietly, boringly, automatically build the thing that the people pretending to have made it actually don't have. You are holding the most valuable financial assets on the planet right now. 40 years of compounding time while being told you're behind by people who would trade everything to get that time back. Don't spend it trying to look wealthy. Invest it and actually become wealthy. Start with $1,000, capture the match, kill the high interest debt, automate the $200, and let time, the one thing you have more of than any millionaire alive, do what time does. The numbers say you're average. What you do next is what makes you the exception. If this video gave you a clearer picture of where you actually stand, hit that like button right now. It genuinely helps this channel reach more young people who need to see this before they make the expensive mistakes. Subscribe to Slime's Wealth Academy if you are not already here. We break down the real mechanics of money every single week. No jargon, no gatekeeping, no shame. Drop a comment, how old are you and which number surprised you most? The savings, the debt, the net worth. I read every single one. And if you've got a friend who needs to see they're not behind, that they're average, and that average is beatable, send them this video. It might be the most valuable thing you do for them this year. I'm Slime Johnson. This is Slime's Wealth Academy. Regular people, real wealth, no gatekeeping. See you in the next one.